So just to give you a bit of background about myself, ROOT6 has two sort of arms. So we've got a system integrator and reseller arm, which is you're all familiar with, hopefully, which is why you're here. We also have a separate division that make a product. So we are a manufacturer, we sell our product around the world, and it's all about automating file-based processes. So whether that is camera ingest or news ingest, or whether that's file delivery, that's some sort of a challenge that the product solves. So I work as a senior product specialist on that and a software developer. So I have worked with DPP deliverables and writing that functionality since the sort of inception, really, of the standard, working on some of the sort of insert edit functionality, as well as sort of moving some of that to 4K and UHD. So what I'll do is I'll go through what was sort of planned, and that's more of a focus on ingest. So talking about the pitfalls and practice of doing ingest, managing metadata models and things like that, and then perhaps at the end, after that, we can have more of a Q&A about UHD file delivery, and any queries or concerns you might have. Does that sort of sound okay to everyone? Is that all right? Okay. Good. Fine. Well, I'll go through this at a slightly quicker pace then. So just to say what we would talk about today in the planned agenda. So I planned a few sort of areas. File-based ingest, just talking about how we've got to where we are and some of the problems that arise and why it's now quite a sort of sticky situation and not as simple as it first was when ingesting file-based media and footage. And then just look at some of those ingest pain points and pitfalls. So I go into lots of facilities around the world looking at their various ingest practices. That can be news, traditional post-production, high-end film. And these are just some sort of observations that I picked up along the way of people who are trying to do ingest in any sort of significant volume. And I find that normally divides into three areas. So that can typically be scaling the process, so scaling that ingest process to meet demand, managing a meaningful metadata model, and that is really key to the whole process. It's not sort of just stamp collecting, as I like to say. It goes way beyond that and is really crucial in the backbone of the whole process. And then how we can eke the most sort of speed and performance out of those processes. And then I'm just going to talk about some workflows in action. Again, as I say, we can then look at perhaps some file delivery. I know one or two of you here specifically for file delivery, so we can then touch on that from there. So just a bit about the product that I work on and the background and area that I'm coming from. So ROOT6 Technology, which is the division that I work in, we make a product called ContentAgent. So some of you in this room have made the wise decision and already own a ContentAgent, which is great, good for you. Some of you may not have known it before. So it is an automated file-based workflow management system, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's really all around automating any sort of task that is traditionally sort of file-based for processing your media. So it's a software-based application, and you can design workflows, as we like to call them, sort of nodal-based steps for processing your media, and they can be things like file-based ingest, so ingesting camera cards, news footage, news feeds into editorial environments. They can be sort of more broadcast deliverables workflows, so we have a big sort of following who use us to make broadcast deliverables in the UK and other territories in sort of Scandinavia, the US, for example. And then more sort of review and approval, web, consumable copies, frame rate conversion. So it's all about taking those traditionally linear manual tasks and allowing you to design your own process to automate those. And again, just a sort of few of the people that depend on ContentAgent for their sort of day-to-day lives and processes from various areas such as news, production, post-production, sports, all sorts. So to sort of start on what we came here to talk about today, how have we got to where we are with sort of card ingest, file-based ingest, and how the problems that we've got today arisen. So, as I'm sure some of you remember, that previously ingest depended on well-defined physical objects, magnetic tapes, and generally that meant if it could fit in a slot, you could ingest it and you could play it. There's a smaller pool available because it was expensive to produce these formats. So whether it's mini DV, Betacam, D5, D10 later on, and as a consequence of these being fixed devices, fixed mechanisms, there was only a very small subset of frame rates, frame sizes, and colour models you could work with, which both reduce the sort of capture complexity and also reduce the sort of downstream processing complexity as well. In the late 90s and early sort of 2000s, we then moved to a file-based mechanism. So we begin to see one of the first sort of Ikegami and Avid EditCam, and then devices like Panasonic P2, XDCam, S/S, using perhaps new sort of professional formats. So, a lot of these drove some of the inception of the MXF format. So I spent quite a lot of my time working on MXF manipulation and software, so I'm sort of well aware of the initial problems that these cause, and a lot of the sort of design decisions made at these stages still impact how we process files and make MXF files and storage mediums today. So equally, we had rapid advances in sort of digital compression technologies. So whether that's transforms for processing images, whether that's storage speeds and access methods, and equally what we could display on the other side. So display technologies improving, bandwidths improving, frame display rates improving, and all of this meant we start to diverge the pool of formats we can make. Nowadays, we've got hundreds of video codecs, audio codecs, and file formats available. So hopefully you all sort of know the difference between a codec and a format, but a codec is a method via which we compress our media and decompress it, so reducing its overhead in size before, and equally optionally throwing away data in the image. And a file format is designed to contain that and marry up multiple Essence components together. So we now got mechanisms to store those very wide range of frame rates I talk about, very wide ranges of resolutions, and it's not always clear what we're holding either, despite sort of the best intentions to define metadata standards and description mechanisms. They're not always employed, and they're equally interpreted in different ways. Something like JPEG 2000 is particularly guilty of being interpreted in lots of different ways. And the mediums that are making these are more and more diverse. So I'm sure lots of you are working now with cameras like the A7S, GoPros, always sort of production nightmare. You can pick some of these up that shoot 4K for less than 300 quid now, and it's often all the same to production. Near broadcast quality DSLRs, and equally, for 30 grand you can be picking up a RED camera to shoot, cinema quality footage, which is not an insane amount of money for what you're getting. So we've got a lot of media that's produced quickly. It's complex to process, and it's often very diverse. So that, as I often see, leads us to three common sort of areas. And this is something I see time and time again, whether I'm in a sort of post facility in America or a news facility in India. They often have these problems. This is something that we often look to solve. So first of all is how we can scale these processes. This is more sort of human concept, a workflow concept. So as I'm sure you know, file-based ingest tasks are highly repetitive, dull. They often use expensive tasks for low value and work that's hard to monetize. So they can be intricate, they can be fiddly, and equally, if you're asking someone to do a lot, errors can be introduced at this stage, which sort of can be fatal further down the line, or at least very hard to unpick. At the worst stage, that's breaking the whole conform process and having to match an entire sequence at the other end, which puts everyone's budgets up and puts timescales back. And equally, if we're asking people to consistently sort of copy and verify content, rename it, add metadata, transcode to exactly the same format every time, humans make mistakes and footage starts to come in at the wrong frame rate, wrong frame size. I frequently see projects where all the media has been ingested at the wrong frame rate, and I'm sure some of you had experience of that, which again means we're sort of back to square one when it comes to conforming. There's often stuff that's not obvious as well, so aliases and signal faults can be produced at a very early stage, and they might not represent themselves as something like DNX or ProRes. These are formats that are designed for sort of high performance and multiple generations of compression. They handle sort of multiple generations of compression and compositing. It's what they're designed for very well. But an alias is still an alias in a signal. And by the time you get to sort of your compressed broadcast systems, or you need to look at doing frame rate conversions, perhaps from often see drone footage, it needs to be frame rate converted. Those aliases can become a big problem. So identifying those early on can be very helpful. And then sort of from the human aspect as well, lots of people or lots of places, the solution is to either to throw more staff at the same sort of infrastructure, or throw more infrastructure at the same staff. And even with the best will in the world, humans take breaks. They can't manage many systems at the same time. So this is when, we've had a number of studies done by independent post-production facilities who find that often their resource usage is less than 27%. So less than 27% of the time it's actually being used by staff. So if you can have a sort of automated producer-consumer sort of queuing mechanism that's calling back for work when it's free, this really speeds up processes and make sure you're using all of your available power as well. Metadata is something that I personally spend a huge amount of time working on. So there's quite often a misconception that metadata is just nice to have information about, the director, or the colour of the sky, or your dog's birthday, or whatever, stuff that's kind of great if it's there, but we're not really bothered if it's not. But actually, metadata is crucial to that whole process, and defining hierarchies, models, and relating back to our original source media. I don't know how many of you are sort of familiar with the concept of mobs and mob IDs that are used to uniquely identify media. Great if you are, but these are guaranteed unique strings of numbers and characters that we can uniquely group together media objects with. So if you're using Avid Media, maybe you're using, doing a dynamic relink, or you're relinking off a source file ID. That is metadata that is a uniquely generated key, so you can be sure that your media is derived from the same source. So it doesn't matter how many C001 clips you have, you're always going to link back to the same source. So these are sort of key elements that, it's not just stamp collecting, it's data about your data that's crucial. Being flexible with metadata allows, for a range of workflows that make conforming easy. So at the best, sort of, as I say, sort of most grown-up level, we can be relating our UMIDs back, following a chain, so we can be guaranteed to get the same media from whatever resolution we've generated. But we can also, with more sophisticated file formats like MXF and AAF, embed metadata that is carried through the chain. So that's really one of the design decisions behind MXF and AAF, is that they have very advanced, dependable data models. So being able to leverage that and use that in a workflow means we can reduce headaches further down the line. And equally, there's speed limiting factors as well. So lots of people say to me, well, I've got loads of CPU resource, I've got loads of RAM resource, but why is it still going slowly? And the answer is there's often not even the most significant thing affecting it. Storage speed is, to me, one of the most important factors when processing media, especially in parallel. So even if you have a fast camera card, for example, you might have a card which performs very well if you're reading and writing serially from it. As soon as you start to do concurrent operations, that can slow down dramatically, and it can be faster to access that serially. So certain storage mechanisms will perform very differently depending on how they're accessed. And again, being able to be flexible with that and being able to automatically make decisions about that can really help in a workflow and reduce some of those storage bottlenecks. Equally, people, and facilities have certain RAID mechanisms in place. I'm sure you all know what a RAID is, but it's if you don't, it's a way of arranging disks to leverage performance and redundancy across a sort of array. These arrangements can equally massively affect how your media processes, the speed at which it processes. So storage that's just designed for redundancy can be very slow to write to. So being able to sort of choose between storage that's designed for high performance access, storage that's designed for redundancy, and a mixture of the two can affect the workflow as well. So those are the sort of three areas that we come up against the most that are causing problems as part of an ingest process: metadata manipulation, processing and scaling, and the sort of actual speed of processing, beyond just the transcoding. And again, that's sort of what we pitch our product around, and some of the problems that we really design the product to solve. So just so we can touch on some of the file-based questions that you might actually have, I'm going to just skip through that element there, because we've sort of already covered that at the start, just talking about the sort of workflow design and what we can do with the product. It's flexible to a huge amount of incoming formats. So really the idea is you can design a process which has sort of intelligence, can automatically examine your media. So you could make decisions automatically about, storage speed or frame sizes, or, more production orientated metadata, and then use that to generate media which is linked together and securely tied for ingest in multiple formats using our sort of nodal workflow designer. How we access that as well is often a question that we're asked. So we have lots of organisations like news and production who don't employ full-time sort of technical ingest operators or edit assistants who traditionally would be assigned the task of wrangling media. So we might have journalists who know how to log into a computer, and that's about it. And equally, they need control over their media, but they need the sort of automation behind that as well. So this is where we sort of use our card agent product as well, which allows you to build your automated workflows behind it. So the engineer can build an automated workflow which could back up the media automatically, make multiple resolutions, apply LUTs automatically, tie that together with a metadata model so you can relink and conform later on, or automatically ingest that into the editing system. But all the operator has to do is, choose their selects, maybe make some naming decisions and apply some more descriptive metadata, so you're not asking them to tie together the media, review and log it before submitting it to the system. So again, I'm just going to skip through that, but that's what it looks like. So it's a nice clean interface, so people can choose their cards on the left-hand side or their file-based media. They can view it in the middle, make some trims, cut together a little sequence if they want, and then they can ingest it through those automated ingest processes that we sort of touched on earlier. And they can scale that around a sort of render farm. So that allows you to, deploy this to multiple journalists and still have a centralized system. So each one isn't having their own sort of variation of the workflow, which then introduces those problems I touched on earlier that are sort of generated at the top, but then really manifest themselves further downstream. So looking at some of those sort of workflows in action, how do we sort of deploy them in the real world? Well, we have people who are ingesting content into, a single, maybe they've got 3 edit suites, a small block of shared storage. They need to scale their ingest, and equally we've got people who are ingesting into 4 interplays. They're doing sort of news automation on the other side, and they need to scale their ingest as well. So, we got, just to sort of showcase the things that people are doing, we got a number of ingest workflows sort of in action in the field. So, what we've got within this box here is all the automation elements. So traditionally these would be done by an operator, and they might have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps often. Plus each of those would be manually triggered. So first thing that typically happens is people want the content pulled off the card, backed up to the nearline, the fast access mezzanine storage. Typically, that's done, just a simple copy, maybe something like Shotput Pro, but often there's very little automation behind that. It ends up in different locations, so when we come to do a relink, we can't find it, or we have to do a deep scan to pull out embedded file metadata to work out where that is. So introducing automated archive based on metadata really removes that element and that room for error, and then the data can be verified and copied to archive. So where are those traditionally 2 separate tasks that are crucial to our data security and integrity, we can now automate that. We can then trigger from that a number of sort of creations from there. So people often want to encode a proxy. Optionally, if the sort of media is not suitable as a native editing media, maybe it's a weird buttonhole camera or a GoPro or something, a decision can be automatically made about it and a high-res copy can be made. Or we can just keep, by that link there that I'm sort of talking about, we can keep a link back to the native media. So either via embedding a unique identifier in our files, or via using some sort of originated source metadata, we can do a link back to the native media from there. At that point, what we don't often want for our whole card is a collection of individual clips. It's messy, and it's often meaningless just to have hundreds and hundreds of individual clips sort of splayed across an editing system. So grouping those together nicely is sort of key to the process. So that's again where AAF comes in as a great supporting format and something that you can leverage. It's a standard you can leverage. You can leverage it within our product, or you can leverage it within a number of editing systems. And this has really rich metadata handling tools, and so you could use ContentAgent, for example, to automatically sequence your media, automatically make a multicam group of your media based on timecode or media analysis, and give you all your clips grouped as one neat media object, which really simplifies media management. And one of the other nice things you can have ContentAgent do, which is a nice unique feature, is build certain databases for you, and one of those is the Avid database, so media is instantly available. Equally, ContentAgent can be creating, timecode, burnt-in viewing quick times of that file at the same time. Again, it's often a laborious task where someone lays it out on the timeline, overlays the timecode watermark, exports it, transcodes it, uploads it. That can now be all handled automatically, and that can be accessed, neatly from the simple user interface I showed you earlier. So we can apply that automation to that simple ingest. Equally, we can do something very similar, ingesting into Interplay. So I don't know if any of you use Interplay here, but they have a very sort of rigid model based on mob IDs and UMIDs. So you have a concept of a master clip that's defined via a mob ID. You have the concept of the source clip that it came from that's defined by a source mob ID. So these are unique identifiers that identify the source it came from and the clip it represents. So you could have multiple clips at multiple resolutions, all with the same mob ID, master mob ID, with the same source mob ID, and those then appear as just different resolutions of the same clip. And that is, a standardized sort of thing, but ContentAgent can create those for you, keep links between the media, and again, use some of those automatic decisions to create multi-res files. I mean, we do sort of lots of training on the sort of Avid data model, understanding and leveraging mob IDs as well at ROOT6. So if that's, something you're interested in, we can definitely help you there. And then again, it can, we're doing everything in this box is the automated process. So where these traditionally multiple user trigger, operator triggered encodes, reliance on the operator to back up the card in the right place. Again, from a sort of simple endpoint, that can all be triggered and automated. And just the last one I'll talk about equally. It's also possible to work with growing files and employ frame chase editing. So one of the nice things about MXF formats and in fairness some other formats is that they are written in a streamable order. So that means I don't have to have the whole file before I can start editing with it. So ContentAgent can take that media as it arrives, create your multiple copies for you there, and equally at the same time create non-Avid formats, non-editing formats, and create those in parallel. So you can be frame chase editing. This is great for sort of fast turnaround work, whatever the file source. And we are sort of an Avid Alliance partner, so if you are heavily invested in Avid infrastructures, whether that's their storage or the whole sort of asset management areas, you can sort of be guaranteed that they'll work together. So forgive that slightly rushed talk through for file ingest and some of the stuff that we were originally going to cover. I know some of you did come here sort of questions about file delivery, maybe you've got pain points. So that's something that I sort of lead up at ROOT6 and work heavily on. So maybe if we open the floor to sort of open forum about file delivery points that you might have had, or is that sort of what you had in mind, or? So you're from, yeah, okay. So if you might know about our sort of file delivery sort of things that we can do or not. ContentAgent was the first product in the world at the time that could insert edit into a finished AS11 file. So we came up with sort of a workflow solution, as it were, to that. So you could take a finished file, finished master file, and that is a stream of frames, so stored linearly, and ContentAgent can take inserts and drop those in exactly as you would on a tape. So we have this whole sort of, in a very similar way to ingest, sort of automation chain that you can customize to create files. You can insert edit into them to drop in changes, for example. You can manage the QC process. So that was something that we sort of pushed out back at the beginning of 2014. So some of the new stuff that we've sort of done in terms of file delivery. So it's obviously been sort of a big success in the UK, AS11 UK DPP, and other countries have been watching. So I don't know if any of you here deliver to other territories, for example. So we now see quite a lot of derivatives. The Nordics have started their own, something very similar to AS11. France are now implementing AS10, which is sort of a subset of XDCAM. Really, and there are various sort of IMF-esque workflows going on, and all of these follow on a similar concept as something that's kind of ignored about you leveraging the metadata functionality of files. They're simply seen as a sort of video and audio storage mechanism, and leveraging the sort of metadata models behind those to allow you to carry file, video, audio, and their metadata with it. And we've applied some of those same sort of AS11 workflow concepts that were originally, quite heavily uptaken to those workflows. So in terms of product updates, you very soon be able to get the MetaAgent product that you're using for deploying metadata on Mac and PC, and you'll be able to apply some of those sort of workflow automation to AS10 and IMF. There is, and you may or may not have seen, just published a UHD AS11 specification as well. So I haven't actually seen anyone using that in the flesh. It runs in a sort of, the MXF structure is ostensibly quite similar, but this works with a sort of XAVC, and there's so whereas with the HD format it was purely AVC intra, fixed frame rate, fixed frame size, this has more sort of options that broadcasters will be specifying in terms of variable bitrate XAVC, as well as fixed, more sort of high-end fixed bitrate XAVC. And one of the other big sort of differences is that whereas before you would have, essentially to mark metadata, you'd have a key. So every metadata field will be uniquely defined by a key and a length that describes the value of data you'd be holding. So in a central dictionary, you'd register that key XYZ means the series title. So I could see key XYZ, know that that's the series title, and it's the AS11 series title, not the Disney series title or whoever else has bothered to specify a series title. And then I could embed data behind that which actually carries the series title. The big sort of difference here to get that, to get the new format through in a hurry is actually that they simply embed a blob of XML in that file. So you have an XML document, and that's just embedded within the MXF file as well. So that will be, and there aren't, aside from sort of writing your own tools, there aren't many ways to do that at the moment. So, we're sort of working towards more UHD, AS11 sort of support, and that is something you'll sort of see coming both from the broadcaster and the producer side and the sort of manufacturer side in the coming sort of year, I would say. Any other sort of questions, or file delivery, or UHD, or anything to do with that? Or it's quite hot in here, so I forgive you if you want to go and get some iced water as well. Or if you just want to chat as well, I'm out on the table outside. So do drop by and ask any questions. Oh, one at the back.
Can we ask about transcoding? You talked about
yes.
As an automatic operation.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, you've got something on RAW.
Yes.
And it occurred to me when we got to transcoding that we had various problems according to what was being chosen by the editor to sort out.
Okay.
How we transcoded it. So it didn't seem like there was necessarily one answer to that problem.
Yeah.
How can you automate a process like that?
So, yeah, you're right. There is, complete automation with no user input is not what you want, which is often, is sometimes what you want. So we work with lots of sort of film schools and stuff where they don't want any decisions made, and they're purely about fire and forget. But yeah, in your case, you do need some sort of feedback, which is partly why we sort of developed that card agent, so you could ask questions at those stage using sort of intelligent analysis and stuff. So you're what sort of RAW format are you shooting to?
Shot on a 55.
Okay, so you're just Sony RAW sort of thing, and then you're sort of would make a decision about sort of LUTs you want to apply or something,
or
would you?
Even just the transcoding to get it into the DNX format.
Okay, so what decisions would you want to make about sort of
I just want decisions where I don't see artifacts all over the place.
Okay.
I know those things are being sort of made by the editor at that stage. So.
Okay, so I mean, in that case, yeah, I mean that is very much a sort of human decision. So what the best you can do in that stage, I would say, is, and lots of these formats support this, is to debayer it at what's called a lower resolution. So you can at least get information about what it might look like in its format much quicker. So format, lots of the RAW formats support this. JPEG 2000 wavelet-based formats support this. And one of their real advantages is they're sort of made up of tiles at progressively higher resolution. So what I can say to my image is actually I only want the sort of top 2 layers of resolution, so I only want a fraction of the data. So if you can automatically, at least for part of the process, access that at a certain level of resolution, process it very quickly and make some decisions about how you want to feed that back and how you want to process it at a full resolution, that can give you a good idea. So sort of knowing your formats and having transcoding tools that allow you to take advantage of, how the format is made up and being format aware is always useful, I would say.
But it's not automatic, is it?
Well, I mean, you're doing as best you can to expedite the process. There you go. It's there's obviously various quality control softwares which can pick up aliases and things like that. But at the same time, there comes a time when the human knows best until we've reached our sort of iRobot future. So until that point, until we've got robot editors, then I would say being able to expedite the process of finding errors and knowing, going back to that metadata model, being able to accurately track back to those error points. And again, that's one of the great things about using MXF and AAF. They support very rich tools for providing sort of event locators and sequence locators and time-based metadata as well as static metadata within the format. So I can have, that's a mechanism that you're using every time when you make a marker or a span marker in Avid. You're using standardized metadata practices to mark points of interest within a file. So, I agree, that's not sort of fully automated, but I think it sort of certainly helps from my perspective. Anyone else, or you want more delicious brownies from outside? Cool, all right, well, I'm outside, so do drop by, and thanks.